bring a stick and I'll transfer it over and you can catch up. Anyways, okay, we're good. Okay, so the idea is God, it's your perspective, the way you look at it. There's a big difference between this is mine and God has let me have this. I am a steward of, right? Because when you're a steward of things, when you realize, oh, my car belongs to God, it's not mine, well then how do I use it to honor God? Oh, my phone doesn't belong to me, it belongs to God. It's not my phone, it's his phone. How do I honor God with my phone? You know, when you start taking everything you think you own and realizing that God's given you everything, it's a release. And then it all becomes of how can I honor God with what he's given me? And you are a steward of, right? Even when God placed Adam and Eve and he said, look, have dominion over all these things, right? And you take a look at like the word that he told them to have, and it was like, it means to guard, to protect, and to help grow. And it's like you're in charge of all of this. You're in charge of protecting it, of helping it to grow, of guarding it, of tending it daily. And there's a lot that goes on into that. And so when you are a steward of, and everything belongs to God, it changes everything. So like I said, faith, prayer, shows up about 500 times in the Bible, but money's mentioned more than 2,000 times. Whoa. Right? And like I said, 16 out of 38 parables were concerning money. And it's because we have issues with money, right? We want it. We want to hold on to it. We have things to pay for. It's the reason why we survive. It's going to put bread on the table, right? And God's like, no, I'm the reason you survive. I'm the reason there's bread on your table, right? And so very much, tithe means a tenth, but it is very much a testing thing. There's finances because finances tests our hearts, right? Because you'll know very quickly and very easily where your heart is, because where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. I didn't even write this one in my sermon. It's okay. Where it talks about you can't have two masters. You'll either love one or hate the other. It talks about money and it talks about God. But when you go to the root word of money, it doesn't actually say money. So if you go to like original King James or even further, Tyndale or some of the earlier Bibles, it's translated mammon. And mammon, for what it means, is not money. It's a spirit of wanting to possess, of wanting to have. So what it's saying is that you cannot have a spirit inside of you of wanting to have, I need to have this, I need to possess this, and a spirit of loving God where you're giving up. They're counter to each other. They're completely counter to each other because one is complete surrender and the other one is I want, right? And so the original word is mammon. So if you're ever reading through that verse again, you see mammon or you see money, like see if there's a little asterisk on there and a footnote at the bottom of your Bible. See if it says mammon. Because that's actually what it means, a spirit of wanting to possess. And so the idea is, if God has given you everything, he asks you to take care of his church, which is his bride. There's a place where you're supposed to bring your tithe. And so you're supposed to give back to God a little portion. And what that does is it makes everything else that you have redeemed or blessed. And we'll get into that in a moment. By keeping absolutely everything, because God has asked you to give some back, you're then stealing from God. And everything else that you have is then cursed. So it's very interesting. I went to the gas station earlier in the week to fill up. And then there's a little sign that said your oil is low. And my tire pressure is low, and the windshield washer fluid was also low. And my heater wasn't heating too much, and I'm pretty sure it's because I was low on coolant. So I was like, okay, today's one of those days. And I don't know why I picked one of the coldest days of the week to fill up, but I filled up, and I went to the gas station and got coolant and a container of oil and the washer fluid. And I'm like, well, here goes nothing because my fingers were freezing. But I started taking care of my vehicle, and a gentleman comes over, and he's just like, he goes, fixing up the old car, eh? And I'm like, yeah, but she's been reliable. The last 3 cars I had were not so good. I swear every 3 months I had to go to the garage to get something fixed. This is the first time that I actually haven't had any issues. I'm actually quite happy with my car, so I want to take care of her. And he began telling me about all his car problems. How he got a newer truck. It had 50,000 kilometers on it. currently about 150, but he told me how he had to change the engine, how his roof cracked, and he's like, and I had to spend 14,000 fixing this, and 5,000 fixing this, and 5,000 fixing that, and I'm like, have you tried praying? Because I tried that and it didn't work, and I left that alone, but my next instinct was to say, do you tithe? It's very interesting. I meet two kinds of people. It's the ones that can't afford to tithe, and then people who are blessed. There really doesn't seem an in-between, right? Because people who don't tithe can't afford to tithe. And I'm just like, that's an interesting concept. And I used to fall in there too. I used to struggle with that one, right? And so I used to give closer to maybe 3-4% rather than the 10th I was required to. And it was a struggle. And I'm just like, and what I began to realize is that I did other things first. And then I took what was left. And I'm like, okay, here you go. And that whole philosophy was so wrong. That if you say, because naturally we're kind of like, I need to pay my mortgage. That is like first, and then maybe my car. Otherwise they take my car from me and I can't get to work. So that's very important, right? So you get your paycheck and you're like dividing it all up in your mind. It needs to go here, here, and here. But if you begin dividing in your mind, the very first, before anything and everything else, goes to God. Then I need to figure out everything else. But the first goes to God. Then your priorities change. And it's a revelation of your heart. That's why God uses money to test us, because it reveals your heart, right? And so I always had to be like, I have to fix this. I have to make sure this isn't. And then I realized, actually, if I do this tithe thing correctly, I have to give to God first, and He deserves it. And my mind frame had to change. So I was taught this. So it's a book called The Blessed Life by Robert Moris. I'm summarizing more or less the first 2-3 chapters. And it's good stuff. And I learned a lot by reading it. And it was just like, whoa, really need to change my perspective. All right, so it quotes, I'll do some of the blessing and then one of the curses, just so that you can see I'm not lying to you. But Deuteronomy 14:28, at the end of every third year, bring the entire tithe of that year's harvest and store it in the nearest town. Give it to the Levites, who will receive no allotment of land among you, as well as to the foreigners living among you, the orphans, the widows in your town, so that they can eat and be satisfied. Then the Lord God will bless you in all your work. Okay, now if you need to know a little bit about the Levites, when God created the 12 tribes of Israel, He gave each of them a section that they would, well, when you passed away, you gave it to your descendants. They were allowed a certain plot of land. They had inheritance, except the Levites. They were not allowed to have land because they served in the temple. They were there. Some of them were high priests, not always, but they served in the temple, so they were not allowed to have land. So they actually survived by what everyone else brought. And then they were in charge of making sure that everyone was taken care of, the widows and the orphans and so forth and so on. And so here God is saying, make sure that you come and bring, because they don't have everything that you have, and then they're going to use it to take care of all of you anyways. But you need to do that. And when you do that, you'll be blessed in all that your work. Okay, later on in Deuteronomy 15:10, give generously to the poor, not grudgingly, for the Lord your God will bless you in everything that you do. Deuteronomy 23:20, you may charge interest to foreigners, but you may not charge interest to Israelites. That's your own people, so that the Lord your God may bless you in everything you do in the land you are about to enter and occupy. The Lord, so this is 28:8, the Lord will guarantee a blessing on everything you do and will fill your storehouses with grain. The Lord your God will bless you in the land He's giving you. Your towns and your fields, this is the opposite later on. Your towns and fields will be cursed. Your fruit baskets and breadboards will be cursed. Your children and your crops will be cursed. The offspring of your herds and flocks will be cursed. So what I did there, you can see I started in verse 8 and then I jumped to 16. And when I tried to make it all fit on my screen, so just know that there's a difference there. I just didn't paragraph it real well. So it's a jump because I read the first sentence that talks about blessing and then we jump to curse. There's supposed to be a pause there. I apologize. Anyway, your children and your crops will be cursed. The offspring of your herds and flocks will be cursed. Wherever you go and whatever you do, you'll be cursed. The Lord Himself will send on you curses, confusion, frustration, and everything you do until the last of you are completely destroyed for doing evil and abandoning me. Told you I'd give you one at the end. So at the beginning, it's, you'll be blessed, you'll be blessed, you'll be blessed, you'll be blessed. You go against God, then you're cursed. And so when it says you'll be frustrated in everything that you do, there'll be confusion. I'm like, so when people come up and they're just like, oh, this is going on in my life, and this is going on in my life, and this is going on in my life, and this is going on in my life, everything is falling apart, and I'm just, any chance? Do you tithe? I can't afford to tithe, everything's falling apart! And it's like, you can't afford not to tithe. You need blessing is what you need. You need blessing from God, the true person who takes care of you. The true one that gives you your safety, that gives you your provision, and he's testing you through your finances. Does it belong to you, or are you a steward of what God has given you? Good old Abel. This is one of the first times you actually see it. Genesis chapter 4, verse 2. When they grew up, Abel became a shepherd, while Cain cultivated the ground. And when it was time for the harvest, and in other translations it says, in the passage of time, Cain presented some of his crops as a gift to the Lord. Pay attention to the writing. So he grew crops. He took some of them. This is good stuff. I'm just going to put that over there. That's for me for after. We're going to make some good stuff with that. This I'll give to my person over here. This for my kids. And all right, here, God, this one's for you. He took some of what he had. It's just the wording is very different in comparison, okay? Abel also brought a gift. He brought the best. It didn't say Cain brought the best. It just says some, okay? Abel brought the best, and he brought the firstborn. There's a big difference in firstborn to everything else. You don't know if your ewe is going to produce after that, do you? Right? It's like, you just created a lamb for me. This is the continuation of my flock. Wonderful. And then it's like, wait, I have to give that to God? You don't know if your ewe's ever going to produce again. And that's just it, isn't it? Faith is what activates giving. It's where you say, God, I depend on you more than anything else. And so when Abel presented the best, unblemished, white, spotless lamb, and the very first of what he had before any more came in, he said, Lord, this belongs to you. The best and the firstborn lambs from his flock. The Lord accepted Abel in his gift, but he did not accept Cain in his gift. This made Cain very angry, and he looked dejected. And we know how that story goes, right? Not just dejected, he ends up killing his brother over this, right? And God's sitting there being like, don't let sin enter your heart. Don't let it, like, come on, get it's waiting to pounce on you. You need to let that go, and you need to do as I have asked, the best and the first. Okay, so, I guess my kids are downstairs. I had a whole thing set up today, but I'm not sure you guys can see so much over there. We do, don't we? I counted it last night. Here we go. I thought I would put it out there for you. Okay, so I'm not sure if anyone wants to come up to the front and see what I got here, but I figured you'd all be running. Look, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I have 10 $20 bills. It's easy to ask the question, how much of that belongs to God? Well done. Okay. Now, how much am I supposed to tithe of this? Which is how many? $20. So I got to take one of these and give it to God. Now, where people struggle is when I ask this question. Which of the $20 do I give? The very first one that I counted. You don't just take any of them. You definitely don't take the last one. The very first one you ever counted out. The very first thing in your thought, in your mind, when you get your paycheck is supposed to be, this belongs to God. It's not mine. This belongs to God. So not everyone is good on that one, right? Usually it's like, okay, this is paid, this is paid, this is paid. I'm still giving my 10%. Here's one of the 20s. I'm just going to give you the 7th one, maybe not the first one. And it's like, no, that's not the way it works. You do the very first one. Can I put that back in my wallet? I'm not giving it away. I mean, why is it 10%? So the word tithe literally means 10%. And it was something that was like in the very, very, very beginning. 10 is actually representatory of testing. How many commandments are there? When it comes to rules and stuff, when it comes to anything of law, and this is like thousands and thousands of years old, it's what God asked. He said, give me a tenth of what you have. And tenth is like the number of testing. And it literally is a test on the heart. That's what it is. I'm not sure why God didn't say 12% or 15 or... It's the number he placed, and the number he said was okay. Now, what's interesting is I have met people that started at like 2. And so in the same way, when I talk to you guys about fasting, and I said, journal, will you? Journal for me. Journal for yourself, right? Be silly and be like, I'm not fasting at all. Write your life and what happens for the next 2 weeks. And then after that, fast. And then write what happens for the next 2 weeks in your life. And you tell me how your life handles, right? Do the same thing with money. Believe it or not, in the Bible, it's the only place, this is later on in my sermon, but whatever, it's the only place that it says, test me in this. It's awesome because I feel like God is saying, I dare you to. I'll take God up on that dare. Why not? Let's do it. What do you got to lose? Sam Panetta. Oh, shoot, this is being recorded. Sam Panetta, I'll never forget it. I think I've mentioned this one before. But Sam Panetta opened up a dry cleaning business in Woodbridge. It wasn't doing so well. He was getting frustrated. Not only that, but his relationship with his wife was beginning to struggle. And his son, who he wanted to take to Italy to be a soccer player, because he was a very good soccer player. But there was a lot of strain that was beginning to happen there, and he was losing relationship with his son. And there were a lot of things going on, and then we preached on tithing. And he was the kind of guy who on Sunday came with $20 and put it in. Didn't matter how much he made. He's like, well, I gave something, right? And then we preached, and then he was challenged. For the next 3 months, he did nothing. He was like, nope, not doing anything. And things continued to escalate. He was considering separating. I'm going to deny this if you guys ever bring this up. No, he actually gave the testimony in front of everyone, so it's good. I love when he did because it hit hard. After that 3 months, and he did it on purpose, he journaled, and he's like, and then I began to tithe, and he says it was the hardest thing ever. I was so used to doing that $20, that 10% was an exorbitant amount of money for me, especially when I was struggling in my dry cleaning. Like no one was coming to me, and it was just like, how am I going to do this? And then for the next 3 months, he's like, I made it a priority, and it hurt, and I remember going home and crying, being like, I don't even know how I'm supposed to pay the bills. But by the end of the 3 months is when he came up to the front, he gave his testimony, and he says, guys, everything has changed. Absolutely everything has changed. My relationship with my wife has been healed. We've been dating a lot more often. We have healed that. We're protecting that. It goes, my relationship with my kids have changed. I forgot to mention he was falling out with his in-laws as well. But he goes, my relationship with my in-laws has been healed. And he goes, that alone would have been awesome enough for me. He goes, but what's crazy is that a banquet hall came and approached me and said, hey, we do chair covers. Our chairs are a little dingy, so we put covers on them that look really nice, but they need to be washed, right? And he's like, they give me about 1,000 chair covers. And he goes, that alone has made it so that I'm okay. We have a contract now, but not just that, but then I have a contract with these people, and word spread. He goes, now I'm so busy, we're actually opening up a second location with my brother. And he says, I don't know how I never tithed before. No one ever taught me this. And it's cool because he journaled it. And he came up and gave testimony. And it was just like, it was so powerful. When you give your first, please take into consideration, I'm skipping all over my sermon. It's really cool because Jesus is the firstborn male child of God. And so the law says, either you give your first, or if you can't, then you need to give something else to take its place to be redeemed. Okay? And so it talks about how, I think it was a donkey. Anyways, you can do a lamb instead of in order to redeem. And so it's beautiful because John the Baptist says, look, there is the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. And in that moment discussed who he truly was. But I'm like running so far ahead. Exodus 13:2. Then the Lord said to Moses, dedicate to me, every firstborn among the Israelites, the first offspring to be born of both humans and animals belongs to me. Later on in verse 12, you must present all firstborn sons and firstborn male animals to the Lord, for they belong to him. The firstborn donkey may be bought back from the Lord by presenting a lamb or young goat in its place. But if you do not buy it back, you must break its neck. However, you must buy back every firstborn son. So take into consideration in Egypt when the plagues were happening, and you finally get to the last plague, which is the death of the firstborn male children, right? And what did you have to do? You had to kill a lamb, take its blood with the hyssop plant, which means to be broken, by the way. Hyssop means to be broken, which is interesting. Anyways, you dipped it in the blood, and you kind of did this on your door frame. Anyone know what sign I just did? Ah, there it is. So you would actually put the blood, and the spirit would come by and then move on. It would notice that's what was there. And what's interesting is when you actually take the time to read is that a bunch of Egyptians did too. And there were a bunch of Egyptians that ran away with Israel when they ran too. It wasn't all the Egyptians versus all the Israelites. Some of them saw the power of God and began to believe, and they did too. Okay, so it was a test on everyone's heart. But it was redeemed by the spotless blood of the Lamb. So the firstborn of a clean animal belongs to God, but if the animal is not clean, then the clean animal would have to take its place. It was considered redeemed by God. So with the finances, it's the same thing. When you have your first, your best, your only, your before you know whether you're getting any more, you say, I give this to God. And that makes the rest of what you have blessed by God. By holding on to it, you are taking from God. The other way I love telling this story is like this. I am going away to Africa. Okay, and when I go to Africa, I have to pick people here. Now, Gord, I'm going to pick you. Charity, I'm going to pick you. Paul, I'm going to pick you. I may pick on you a little harder. I'm going to Africa. What I'd like for you to do is take care of my family and my wife while I'm gone. I'm going to give you $1,000 a month if that's okay. If you can take 10% of that, so take 100 and give it to my wife while I'm gone, you can keep the rest. Charity, I'm going to do the same thing with you. I'm going to give you $1,000 a month. If you can just take 100 of that and take care of my wife while I'm gone, I'd greatly appreciate it. Paul, same thing. I'm going to give you $1,000 a month. If you can take 100 of that and take care of my wife while I'm gone. Okay? I go to Africa. I go for a year. I come back and I say, wifey, how have you been? How have you been taken care of? Are you good to go? How have you been? And she's like, oh, Gord has been faithful. Gord, when he has always given me $100 a month. I could always depend on Gord. It's been fantastic. Charity started at $100 and then $120 and then $150 and then $200. And whenever I was in trouble, it seemed like it just came through. Paul, he started at $100, but then went to $80, and then $50, and then $20, and then I don't know what happened to him. He fell off the face of the earth. When I come back, they're like, Paul, I gave you $1,000. You got to keep $900. Why wouldn't you take care of my wife while I'm gone? What should I do? I'll probably take everything I've given to Paul away, and I'll probably give it to charity. She took care of my wife while I was gone. Well, here's the thing. Throughout the Bible that it calls the church God's bride. And if he gives you everything, the ability to work, to live, to breathe, and all the finances that you have. Joseph found favor. Oh my goodness, this isn't in my sermon. We're going to be here all day. Joseph, when he gets sold into slavery, he ends up with Potiphar, and it's whew, that's a crummy place to be. But it says he found favor. God allowed him to find favor in Potiphar's eyes. And so Potiphar made him in charge of everything, a slave in charge of everything. It's unheard of in those days. But God allowed there to be favor. And how does that end up? It ends up with him in jail. And then it says in jail, he found favor in the eyes of the jailer. And the jailer made a person who's in jail in charge of the entire jail. That doesn't just normally happen, okay? Here are the keys, good luck. But found favor. Who is it that allows you to find favor in the eyes of other people? It's God. So, Everything that you have belongs to him, but he asks you, take care of my church, take care when I'm not there for a little while. That's my bride, and I will come back for her one day. John the Baptist, look, there's the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. And in that moment, John was already declaring the role that Jesus would play. Jesus was the Lamb, the sacrifice, the perfect and clean sacrifice to redeem us, the unclean. Jesus was God's firstborn son. It was God's tithe to the world, if you will. With Jesus, he redeemed all of us. There's the whole, I covered all that. Exodus 23:19. As you harvest your crops, bring the very best of the first harvest. Where? To the house of the Lord. It gives you pretty clear direction, right? So some people hate me for saying this, but I know some people that tithe to televangelists, and I'm like, you can give to televangelists. That's great. We shouldn't tithe. Tithe belongs in the house of the Lord, technically. And you should be part of the house of the Lord because, back then they had temple, they had places, but truly, house of the Lord is the assembly of the people. There's no word church in the Bible. It's gathering of people. This right here is church, not because we're in this silly building, but because we should be one people, one family together. That's what makes us who we are. That is what church is. And so God says, bring it here. And we're supposed to be taking care of each other. So, when we do the business meeting, you see benevolence in there as one of the categories in finances. That means when we take care of people who've lost someone or someone who maybe just had a child or there's things that the church does to try and take care of other people. Sometimes we get calls and they're just like, can we have some food? Do you guys have any extra food or clothes? Or do you know where I can get this? Or as a church, we do it smart. We don't just give away money. We get gift cards to the grocery store and to the gas station, and we make little packages, and we bring it to try and take care of people. That's what the church is supposed to do. But you can see that God says, bring the best of the first to the house of God. That's where it goes. When Joshua, so Moses passes away watching his people going into the promised land, a little heartbreaking moment, but Joshua is now in charge of Israel. And God says, I need you to go to war against this town. This is the land I've promised you, and you're going to take it. And this is the story of Jericho, who's got over 20-foot walls. Not just high, but deep. Okay? And then it's up on a hill. And I just did a lot of study on this, and it's really cool. Because you have a 20-foot wide wall, and I can't remember how high it is, but it's much higher than 20 feet. And so you have all kinds of armies sitting up there just pelting you with arrows, anyone who comes near you. Okay, and then they had a space, and the space was going uphill, and then a second wall as if the first one wasn't big enough. Okay, so that way if you managed to get past the first wall, you would be stuck in what they called the killing field, the blood field. Because you just overcame one wall, and now you're stuck in a corridor to climb the next wall. While people are plucking you with their arrows and tar and anything else they could throw at you, laughing at you, except the walls fell. And when you read the story, it's good. You should read the story. Anyways, Joshua 6:18, but keep away from the devoted things so that you will not bring about your own destruction by taking any of them. Otherwise, you will make the camp of Israel liable to destruction and bring trouble on it. So God says, take out Jericho. All the plunder you take belongs to me, though. Bring it into the house of the Lord. And when you read the story, they go and do that, except for one guy named Achan. He decided he wanted to keep it. There was a robe, 200 pieces of silver, and a gold bar that weighed more than a pound. I read it last night, so and he buries it under his tent. He's just like, I wanted it so bad. I just wanted it, and so I held it. I took it. Because what they do is they cast lots, and they're like, all right, Lord, please show us who it is that did it. And they cast lots on which tribe of Israel, which family of Israel, which person of Israel. And it came down to Achan. Go figure. God in control of things like that. And they're like, you got to tell me the truth. Did you take something? And he's like, I did. And he's like, you can find it there. Yeah, they kill him, but anyway. Because what happened is they went to war. God's like, okay, you got to keep going to war. Like, you're to take all this stuff. And they sent 3,000 men, and they went to go battle, and they lost. It says they lost soundly. I don't know if that means everyone died, but it says they lost quite soundly. And they came back, and they're in tears. God, what happened? And God's like, you kept some of it. I told you, but keep away from the devoted things. That means what you have taken is devoted to God. Keep away from the devoted things so that you'll not bring about your own destruction by taking any of them. Otherwise, you'll make the camp of Israel liable to destruction and bring trouble on it. And that's exactly what happened. Achan was accursed. Everything that he then touched was, and so they found him out and they ended up killing him and his family. The things they brought to the Lord would have been consecrated, blessed. And if you remember the story of what happened, one person kept it, which is Achan, and he became accursed. Oh, great. I could barely read that. I'll read it from over here. Chapter 7. But Israel violated the instructions about the things set apart for the Lord. A man named Achan had stolen some of these dedicated things, and so the Lord was very angry with the Israelites. See, and then I covered everything I covered already. 3,000 people were soundly defeated, and then the car troubles was in reference to the person who came to talk to me about everything that was going wrong with their car, and I was just like, have you tried praying? And then in my mind I was like, do you tithe? Because there's a difference between what you have being blessed by God, you are a steward of, and being cursed instead. When you steal from God, everything else you have is... So when people come with all these troubles, it's like, and again, you don't believe me? I'm okay with that. I'm telling you, if you don't tithe at all, pick a number. Grow to 10%. I'm not saying go 10% overnight if you've never done this before. Pick a number. 3%, 5%, you pick a number. Okay? But journal your life without. Journal your life doing it dedicatedly. Okay? And when you do it, make sure that the second you get your paycheck, you make it the first, the best, and you have faith that God will take care of the rest. That it's a struggle in your heart, and it will be a struggle. Believe me, I've been there. I know. Basement apartment in Toronto with 3 kids. It was like we barely survived during a lot of it. Ooh, here's one of my favorite stories. When I began to understand about tithing. It was the first of the month. And the first of the month, I would take my $1,400 and put it in an envelope and slide it underneath my landlord, who was upstairs under the door. Except that month, I was $200 short. I had no way to get it. There was just nowhere I could get it. I didn't tell anyone. My wife was the only one who knew. I put the envelope underneath with a note saying, I'll get it to you on Friday. Okay? And I put it under his door. On the way to church... You know when the little light pops up that says you need gas? Yeah, that was on the ride home. Then we were going to church with that light on, right? And it's like, I'm not entirely sure we're going to make it home. Like, we made it home before, and now we have to go to church. We made it to church, but I wasn't so sure we were going to make it home. And so it's like, we didn't tell anyone whatsoever. And at the end of service, so it was kind of, we did it in a gym. So I was there at like 8 o'clock in the morning, setting up all the chairs and the sound system and the speakers. And then at the end of service, I would tear everything down and stack up all the chairs and put everything away. That was my job, and I did that for years. And so I'm packing everything up away. And the board of the church was in another room counting offering. And then they came running out, and they're like, there's this envelope, and it says it's for you. That's all it says. Don't know how much is in it. It just says, I'm supposed to give this to you. Here you go. There's $220 inside. We made it to the gas station, I'm pretty sure on fumes or on God's good grace. We put $20 of gas, and then we went home, and I looked under the door, and I could still see the envelope, like, he didn't take it. He didn't take it yet. Quick, get me a coat hanger. And I fished it out, opened it, took out the note, put in the $200, and slid it under. We tithed that morning, and I'm like, this belongs to God first. I'm not worried about the gas. I'm not worried about the rent. I am worried about the rent. I am totally worried about the gas, but this belongs to God first. It's not easy. Just pick a number that you're comfortable with. I went from like 3% to 10% because that's what God convicted in my heart, and I tried it, and God's never let me down. Somehow my family's always been provided for. Somehow during the toughest moments when your car breaks down and breaks down again, and then you realize that's not worth fixing, and you have no idea what you're going to use to get to, and then a check comes in from the mail and it just says, this is for you for Christmas, and it's like $10,000. God is good, and he's never let me down. Testimony is the best part of this. It's not all the other teaching stuff I do. But anyways, Matthew 6:21, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Sorry, I heard this one said all the time. You love God? Show me your checkbook. I've heard preachers say that one often, and it's like, a lot of us would be embarrassed to show the checkbook. Okay, I went to Tim Hortons and spent like $300 this month on Tim Hortons, but I only gave $150 in my tithe. You know. Do I need to say any more? I really got to make my writing bigger. Malachi 3:10. Bring all the tithes into the storehouse, so there will be enough food in my temple. If you do, says the Lord of heaven's armies. You got to love the way that's written. If you do, says the Lord of heaven's armies. It's kind of terrifying. I will open up the windows of heaven for you. I will pour out a blessing so great that you won't have enough room to take it. Try it. Put me to the test. There it is. I wanted to give you the verse where it says, I dare you to. Okay, that's in the Bible. God's like, I dare you to. I test you with money, so test me. Give it a try. I dare you to. And I will open up the windows of heaven and watch if you have enough room to even keep everything that I'm going to give you. The person who wrote this book, Robert Moris, in the very first chapter, talks about how his vehicle was pretty reliable, but God asked him, as he was an evangelist, and he went from church to preach, and he survived on whatever they gave him. And he was told by God to give up his car. So he gives up the car, and he's like, I have no idea how I'm even getting home today, but this is what God asked me to do, and I need to be faithful, right? And he talks about how he gave it up, and then someone says, hey, you need to help me clean out this van. He had just bought it, right? And there they are cleaning it, and he's like, so why are we cleaning out your van? Like, do you want me to get the umbrella? Like, aren't you going to need that? And he goes, God asked me to give the van to you, okay? But the umbrella is mine, and I'm going to need it, right? And gives the guy the van, and he's just like, whoa. But what's crazy is 2 months later, God asked him to give up the van. And he talks about the next 18 months, where almost every 2-3 months he's asked to give up his car, and God just blesses him with another one, and another one, and another one. And by the end of it, and I'm crying reading this stinking chapter, but by the end of it, God had asked him to get rid of both his cars, because at that point he had to, and his house, and everything that he owned. And so he sold everything. He had given up his cars. He's sitting on his front porch, and the house is for sale, and he's like, there, it's already sold, God. And not just sold, I'm giving it away. He gave away his cars. He sold all the stuff that was inside the house and gave away the money. He had nothing. And he's like, you just need to tell me who I need to give the house to. And then he got a call. And the call says this, good day, sir. And he's like, because he was like, you ever hear the term, you can't outgive God? He was like, God, I got you now. All right. And he's like, okay, I know what this call is. He's going to give me a car. But that's not replacing 2 cars, a house, and everything that I own, is it? And the call, he saw who it was. Call is like, so God instructed me to buy you a plane. I bought the plane. It's fueled. I've paid for the pilot for the year. I've paid for the rental of the hangar. He goes, I don't know why, but I just want you to know it's all taken care of. He became a missionary and went to where he needed to go for the next year. Can you imagine living a life like that? Can you imagine living a life where 10% isn't enough anymore? It's like, God, I've given you 10, but I wonder if I can't do 12, 15, 20. Can I survive off of 8 and give you the rest? I dare you, God. Can I outgive God? It's the only place where it says test him. So I dare you to. Oh, what else can I say? 2 Chronicles 31. I love this one. I had to quote this one. In addition, he required the people in Jerusalem to bring a portion of their goods to the priests and the Levites, so they could devote themselves fully to the law of the Lord. When the people of Israel heard these requirements, they responded generously by bringing the first share of their grain, new wine, olive oil, honey, all the produce of their fields. They brought a large quantity. A tithe, again, the word tithe literally means 10. So a tithe of all they produced. The people who had moved to Judah from Israel and the people of Judah themselves brought in the tithes of their cattle, sheep, goats, a tithe of the things that had been dedicated to the Lord their God, and they piled them up in huge heaps. It says great heaps. They began piling them up in the late spring, and the heaps continued to grow until early autumn. When Hezekiah and his officials came and saw the huge piles, they thanked the Lord and his people, Israel. Where did all this come from? Hezekiah asked the priests and the Levites. And then I'm giving you the last verse. So we went from verse 9 to verse 18 here. Here's the last verse of that chapter. And Azariah, the high priest, from the family of Zadok, replied, "Since the people began bringing their gifts to the Lord's temple, we have had enough to eat and plenty to spare. The Lord has blessed his people, and all this is left over." Early spring, they start just making a pile. Just making a pile. And then they're like, okay, that pile is going to collapse and kill someone. Let's make another one. And they start making heaps everywhere, and they're like, this is God. We're giving this to God. That's who it belongs to. And you hear that? And the Lord blessed his people, and this is all that's left over. And I will open up the windows of heaven. Watch if you can even store it. Test me in this. In all that he did in the service of the temple of God and in his efforts to follow God's laws and his commandments, Hezekiah sought his God wholeheartedly, and as a result, he was very successful. And so there's the question: where is your heart? When you ask the question, "Dear Lord, give us today our daily bread," are you asking for, "Dear God, would you fill up my bank account so I know I'm good all year?" That's not the way it goes. Faith is what activates the giving. Faith is what says, "God, I trust you before I trust anything else." And it's, again, not easy for everyone to do. It takes discipline. It takes work. It takes practice. It takes a leap of faith. It really does, to sit and say, I don't know. When I look at, all my expenses and what's going on in life, and I'm like, 10% is, that's going to hurt, right? Do what you can, but test God in it. Pick a period of time. Pick an amount, but make it your first. Make it your best. And believe that God will take care of you. And when you are blessed, and in like a year from now, when you've brought this to full fruition, right, and you go to like that 10%, and then you're just like, there, I finally made it. I'm there. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Then come stand here and tell everyone else what happened in your life. If God says test, I got to be faithful to as a pastor that you guys will end up with stories, okay? That you guys are going to struggle through this just like I did, and you'll be able to come stand here and sit and say, I did. I didn't trust Luigi a whole bunch, but I trusted God. I'm okay with that. Okay? But I trusted God, and I trusted God with this amount, and then this amount, and then he blessed me, and then he blessed me, and then he blessed me. I dare you to outgive God. See what happens in your life. In Echo Bay, as a part-time pastor in Echo Bay, I'm guilty, guys. I'm guilty of this. I struggle with this myself. So what tended to happen is I made $1,000 a month. That was my contract there. I'm a part-time pastor, which usually meant that I worked full-time for part-time pay. That's just the way it worked. And my wife worked. She finally became the manager, so it was a little bit better than minimum wage, but she worked serving people coffee. It was also a yarn store, so it was a cool place for her to hang out, and she met a lot of people. But generally what we tended to do is we tended to hoard as much as we could over the summer, because in the winter all work would dry up. And so summertime would come, and I would work at the landfill. because people brought their garbage to the landfill that didn't get picked up. So I worked at the landfill as people came in. I worked at the landfill. I picked up a contract with the township because they had a boardwalk that went out into the wetlands, except most of them were rotting. So to replace all their boards. I worked for Census Canada. That usually meant that I was up at about 6 o'clock in the morning preparing my day and coming home at about midnight, 10, 11, right? I had to go, we had a large Mennonite community. They don't exactly read and write. When you do Census Canada, I had to interview them personally to be able to fill out all their stuff, to hand in their census. So I had 5 jobs, because then I'm also a pastor, and that's what my summer generally looked like, right? Because what I wanted to do is I wanted to manage to hoard as much as I could to survive the winter. And then you have to tithe on that. And then, like I said, there was a time where my car broke down, and I fixed it, and it broke down again, and I fixed it, and then there was no point fixing it anymore, and then I don't know who did it, but we got 10 grand in the mail, and we were able to get another car that kept us going. And I look at all those moments, and I'm just like, it was hard. On average, we made under $34,000 a year, which meant we were in the poverty line, but we pushed on. When I came and applied here, and you guys decided to take me on, it was exciting, because I would go from part-time to full-time. And I was like, some security. Yay, thank you, Lord. And we came here, and you guys know, for those of you who've been here forever, 3 months after I was here, COVID hit full force and shut down the church. If I was still in Echo Bay and COVID hit, that church closed down. Like, where would I have been? Work would have dried up. You can't serve coffee when COVID is running rampant all over the place. We would have had nothing. God took care of me. He took care of my family. I have never, ever been in a place where God doesn't take care of me. Can I challenge you? Can I encourage you to test God? To give it a try? And again, if 10% is too high for you, that's okay. Start at 2, 3, 5. Pick an amount, but stick by the amount. Okay? And let it be a struggle in your heart. That's okay. It's good to have that struggle. Because 5, 10 years from now, when you look back and be like, I remember I struggled. How did I ever live a life not giving to God? Because He has blessed me. He has taken care of me. He has, and then you'll have a story. Tithing's not an easy one to preach on. Everyone wants mammon. They want to possess. They want to have. Right? It was interesting moving from Southern Ontario to up here, because down there it wouldn't be uncommon to have a Ferrari or Lamborghini drive by, especially if you went to like Good Life Fitness. There's just like, I'm just like, cheapers. Rich people like to work out. And came up here, and you don't see any of those cars, but you see really fancy trucks. And so I'd ask my friends, I'm just like, why does everyone own a truck? Those things are awful in gas. And if you're not putting a plow on it, you're not putting it to work. Well, what's the point? Yeah, you get to bring your friend's couch over to his new house. And Luigi, it's a status symbol up here. I'm like, oh. They're like, yeah, you get the fancy $80,000. $80,000! Sorry. My first cars were $2,500 and $3,000 that I paid because I had good relationship with the salesman, and they let me pay it in increments of $500 every 2 weeks. So I'm like, $80,000? You can buy a house for that? And they're like, oh yeah. And I'm like, but do they not put it to work? No. They just get a lease. And I'm like, well, that puts you in debt. And they're like, yeah, well, that's what we're all doing. And I'm like, well, that's not real smart, And then, because they got the truck, and then with the truck comes the snowmobile. With the snowmobile comes the ATV, and with the ATV comes the boat, and I'm just like, it's a different kind of life. Watch if God doesn't just totally take care of you. I never thought I'd own an ATV. I told Megan, I'm like, yeah, we live in the north. I'd love to have one, but I'd also like to own my house, not the bank own my house for me. Right? It's like, congratulations, you're the new owner of this house. I'm like, no, I'm not. When they handed me the papers to sign, finally at the end, I'm like, no, you own it. I'm just paying you back. I'm not even halfway there yet. So, you still own it. But someone moved away and gave me their ATV. I got to take the kids out and my wife out. I'm just like, God knows the desires of my heart. And He's taking care of me. And even the things I don't deserve, even the things that are just pleasure. It's not And I don't deserve it, but I've been blessed and blessed and blessed again. And God is good, and he is faithful to those who trust and believe in him, who give their all and say, God, you first. I trust you and I'm giving it all to you. Abel gave the first and the best, not knowing whether the sheepies would produce more sheepies. He gave the best and was like, God, I love you, and I depend on you. Not money, not my home, not my security. I depend on you. I breathe, I live, I exist every moment because of you. If I have an opportunity to bring you glory, it's because you set up the whole situation anyways. It all belongs to you. Change your perspective. Remember that you are a steward of. You don't actually own anything. God, my ATV is not my ATV, it's your ATV. How can I bring you glory with that now? Fun questions. Pretty sure that's it. Will you bow your heads and pray with me? Lord, Mammon is a powerful spirit. We want to hold on to, especially when we've struggled and suffered in life, especially when we've been brought from places of nothing. I remember those times. I remember those places. And then when I finally did have, I wanted to earn it all. I wanted to fight. And my biggest struggle was letting go. It was not having to take 5 jobs and saying, I'll be the reason why my family survives. I didn't need to do that. I needed to depend on you. I needed to trust you more. I needed to give up this idea that I own or possess anything at all. The only thing I want to hold on to is the hem of your robe. If even your shadow is nearby, Lord, I know I am safe. If I can hear your voice, everything else is taken care of. What else could I possibly ever need? This week, I said, hey, Lord, all I've ever wanted was for you to love me. And ironically, you responded not with the I love you, you responded with, Luigi, all I've ever wanted was for you to love me. And then I said, Lord, I love you. I love you so much. All that I am belongs to you. And he replied, and son, I love you. I've given up my life for you. I would do anything for you. And then the verse, ask for anything in my name, came to mind. And the only thing I could ask for was just a closeness, a depth of relationship with my Father. I don't want or need anything else. I need his word, his every spoken word, his voice. What else could I possibly ever want in this life other than the one who made me and has invented what love is, what I was created for love and to love. So Lord, help me let go. Help me let go of the idea of possession, of wanting to have and accumulating, and let me just hold on to you. Lord, show me what I am a steward over, and allow me to give you honor and glory through that. Allow me to bless the people around me, Lord. I'm here for such a short time, and I take none of it with me anyways. Let me leave it not just for my children, but for generations to come and for other people. If it can bring you glory, that's what I want it to do. I own nothing, but I belong to you. And I know as my Father, you take care of me in all ways. Lord, let that be our prayer this morning. May we begin to identify the things in our lives that we've worked so hard for and we think we own. Things that our heart considers treasure, but that isn't you. Would you begin to show us in our lives what those things are, and may we begin to let go. May we stop fighting for those things and instead fight for a deeper relationship with you. Lord, for the people who've never done something like this before, would you begin to just do a work inside of their hearts? And as they test you, I hope they do, as they test you, God, I know we can't outgive you. I know that you pour out blessing after blessing after blessing. Would you remind them, would you show them, Lord, that you multiply, that you make things grow, that you provide everything, and that for the rest of their lives they can completely just depend on you. Help us let go, Lord. Lord, I always pray for protection as we go about our lives. Watch over us. Keep us from sickness. Keep us from whatever it is that you need to keep us from, God, but keep us safe. And then give us opportunity as we grow in relationship with you. Give us opportunity to share that growth to the world around us, to let them know that we have a God that did not abandon us, but lives with us every single day. Depthen our definition of what love is, so that we could better share it with a world that does not know you and therefore does not know what love is. Encourage us and forever allow us to continue to grow and grow closer to you. In Jesus' mighty name I pray. And everyone said, Amen. I'd like to invite the worship team to come and close us in a song while I wipe my tears away.